Good evening, dear listener. I'm Selene, your boring storyteller. Tonight, we set our course toward the vast Pacific, to a place where the ocean met steel, fire, and the quiet resolve of men who knew each dawn might be their last. Whether you are stretched out beneath your blankets or simply sitting somewhere quiet with the hum of the surrounding evening, I'm grateful you're here. If you're new, I hope you stay. There are many more nights like this, each one a journey into the echoes of history. Also, do feel free to subscribe for more sleepy stories like this one. Tonight, we drift back not through centuries, but only decades, into the spring of 1945. Imagine you are standing on the deck of a ship, the sea stretching endlessly in all directions, the air smelling faintly of salt, fuel, and distant gunpowder. The waves slap against the hull in a slow, steady rhythm. This isn't just any ship, it's your magic vessel, a portal that carries you across time. When you step forward, the world changes, and you find yourself among the thousands of men bound for a place called Okinawa. It is April 1st, 1945. The battle to come has been named Operation Iceberg, the largest and bloodiest fight in the Pacific theater of World War II. It will last 82 days, from this moment until the humid days of late June. Army Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner, Jr., standing high on the command ship's bridge, oversees the massive invasion force, the U.S. Army's 7th, 27th, 77th, and 96th Infantry Divisions, the 1st, 2nd, and 6th Marine Divisions, and the Joint Army-Marine Tactical Air Force. The sea bristles with life. Over 102,000 soldiers, 88,000 Marines, and 18,000 Navy personnel, many of them medics or Seabees, who will build and repair under fire. The decks groan under the weight of landing craft, artillery pieces, and stacks of ammunition. Around them, the Royal Navy, Australian, New Zealand, and Canadian ships cut through the swells, their flags snapping in the wind. Somewhere beyond the gray horizon lies an island, holding nearly 100,000 Japanese troops under Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima, a mix of seasoned soldiers, airmen, naval infantry, and conscripted Okinawans. The Americans expect a brutal beach landing, but the enemy does not wait there. Instead, the Japanese have vanished into a labyrinth of caves and tunnels in the rocky hills inland, determined to draw the Americans into a slow, grinding battle of attrition. For the men in the landing craft, the first minutes are eerily quiet. The Navy's bombardment thunders over their heads, pounding unseen hills and ridgelines, shaking the very air. The ramps will drop soon, but not into the storm of bullets they had imagined. The real fight will come later, hidden in the earth itself. This strategy will cost the Americans dearly. More than 12,000 lives and tens of thousands more wounded. Offshore, the Japanese prepare another weapon, the largest kamikaze assault of the war. From mainland airfields, pilots take off, knowing they will not return, aiming their planes at the ships below. 26 Allied ships will be sunk, 168 damaged, and thousands of sailors lost. Almost 40% of all U.S. casualties here will be at sea. Yet tonight, before the engines roar and the sand darkens with fire, there is a strange stillness. Men sit shoulder to shoulder, their helmets low, their thoughts their own. Some think of home. Some focus only on the weight of their rifle. And here, dear listener, I let you linger in this quiet moment before history crashes forward. The sea is calm for now. The sky is pale and unbroken. You're safe on this deck, watching the horizon without fear, the warm wind brushing your face. Close your eyes and let the rhythm of the waves steady your breath. The cost of Okinawa was staggering, and not only for the Americans. The Japanese garrison was almost entirely destroyed, many soldiers dying in combat, others choosing suicide over surrender. The tragedy extended beyond the battlefield. Tens of thousands of Okinawan civilians perished, some caught in the crossfire, others driven by desperation or propaganda to end their own lives. The island itself became a graveyard, its ridges and fields scarred forever by what had taken place there. On May 29th, 1945, U.S. troops reached the shattered walls of Shuri Castle, the ancient seat of the Ryukyu kings. In a brief, symbolic act, a Confederate flag was raised over the ruins, its crimson and blue stark against the gray sky. It lasted only 3 days. General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr. ordered it replaced with the Stars and Stripes, a decision steeped in personal meaning. Buckner's own father had been a Confederate brigadier general and later governor of Kentucky. Buckner himself would not live to see the battle's end. On June 18th, while visiting the front lines to check the progress of his troops, he was struck by Japanese artillery. The highest-ranking U.S. officer to be killed in World War II. He was gone within hours. His death marked a somber turning point. Command passed briefly to Marine Corps Major General Roy Geiger, the only Marine to ever command such a vast joint force in the field, before Army General Joseph Vinegar Joe Stilwell assumed control. Losses continued to mount even in the battle's final days. On June 19th, Brigadier General Claudius Miller Easley, commander of the 96th Infantry Division, was killed by machine gun fire while checking on his men. The fight had no safe vantage point, no rear area untouched by danger. Even those tasked with telling the soldiers' stories paid the ultimate price. On April 18th, before the main battle had even reached its peak, war correspondent Ernie Pyle was killed by Japanese gunfire on nearby Hiroshima. Known for his vivid and compassionate writing about the everyday soldier, his loss was felt deeply across both the European and Pacific theaters. Among the countless battles within the battle, one stands apart in memory: the fight for Hacksaw Ridge. It was here that Army Medic Corporal Desmond T. Doss, a man who refused to carry a weapon or harm the enemy, performed acts of courage so extraordinary they would echo through history. One by one, under relentless fire, he carried or lowered 75 wounded comrades to safety. For this, he was awarded the Medal of Honor in October 1945, a rare recognition for a conscientious objector. His story would be told decades later in the film Hacksaw Ridge. But in 1945, it was just one bright light in the dark storm of war. By late June, Okinawa was in Allied hands, but the victory was heavy with the weight of sacrifice. The beaches, once filled with landing craft, were littered with debris. The hills, once alive with fire, lay silent under the summer sun. And now, dear listener, imagine that quiet. The roar of the guns has faded. The air smells not of smoke and salt, but of rain on warm earth. The island's grasses sway gently, covering scars. Time has begun to soften. You are far from danger here, standing in the stillness of a place that has known both horror and peace. Let that calm settle over you like the last light of evening. Also, although the battle was officially declared over on June 23, 1945, Okinawa was not yet truly silent. In the jagged limestone hills and deep shadowed caves, scattered Japanese soldiers remained in hiding. Among them was Masahide Ota, who would decades later serve as governor of Okinawa Prefecture. For many, the war did not end with the last gunshot. It ended in darkness, in the quiet echo of dripping water inside caves, where survival meant remaining unseen. In the final hours of the battle, Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima, commander of the 32nd Army, faced the inevitable. Surrounded and with no path to victory, he chose to commit suicide at his headquarters, following the samurai tradition of seppuku. His chief of staff, Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, asked permission to do the same. Ushijima refused, telling him, "If you die, there will be no one left who knows the truth about the Battle of Okinawa. Bear the temporary shame, but endure it." Yahara obeyed. He would become the highest-ranking Japanese officer to survive. And years later, he recorded his account in the book, The Battle for Okinawa, ensuring that the events and decisions of those months would not be lost to time. The capture of Okinawa had been intended as the springboard for Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of mainland Japan. But the war would take a different turn. The dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined with the Soviet Union's entry into the war, brought Japan to unconditional surrender on August 15th, 1945. Okinawa remained under U.S. administration until 1972, when it was returned to Japanese control. Today, the island stands not as a battlefield, but as a place of shared history between two nations, now bound as allies. In recent years, military historians and strategists have revisited Okinawa's story for the lessons it offers. In his 2024 article, Okinawa 1945 and Lessons for Island Battles, Christopher L. Kolakowski emphasized the essential truth the campaign revealed. Victory depended on the coordination of all three services: land, sea, and air. No single branch could succeed alone. Each relied on the timing, precision, and endurance of the others. This was as true for the Japanese defense as it was for the American assault. Kolakowski suggested that these lessons remain relevant today, particularly in any potential conflict involving Taiwan. In such a scenario, the location of bases, how close they are to the theater of operations, would determine speed, resource efficiency, and sustainability. The islands of the South China Sea, the coastal positions of Quemoy and Matsu, and the Penghu archipelago might all play roles in the geometry of modern warfare, much as Okinawa once did in 1945. Yet for all its strategic weight, Okinawa is also a reminder of the cost of such battles. The lessons are not written only in military textbooks, but in the quiet fields, the memorial stones, and the stories passed down by survivors. And now, dear listener, picture Okinawa as it is tonight. The beaches are calm, the waves folding gently onto the sand. The air smells faintly of the sea and blooming flowers, not smoke. Shuri Castle rises, rebuilt against the night sky. Its red walls lit softly, no longer scarred by war. The hills are green again, their caves empty, except for shadows. Let that vision stay with you. A place once torn apart, now whole, where the only sounds are wind and water. Breathe deeply. The battle is far behind you. You are safe here, in the quiet, after the storm. Sleep now, and let the peace of this shore carry you into the stillness of the night. As a result, the defenses on Okinawa turned its rolling hills into a carefully engineered death trap. Because of the island's strategic value, its position just 350 miles from the Japanese mainland, Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima's forces had been given months to prepare. They dug deep into the earth, carving miles of tunnels, and constructing hidden bunkers that laced the southern half of the island like a buried fortress. Much like General Tadamichi Kuribayashi's strategy on Iwo Jima, the Japanese planned not to meet the enemy on the beaches, but to bleed them slowly, forcing the Americans to fight for every ridge and hollow. Strong points were positioned to defend one slope from the safety of another, creating interlocking fields of fire. The pillboxes and gun emplacements were concealed within caves or shielded by thick stone, immune to much of the naval shelling. Every approach to these defenses meant scaling a hill under fire, clearing the position, and then turning to face the next hill beyond, repeating the process over and over. For the Americans, it was a campaign of attrition in its purest form. In the weeks before the landing, the U.S. Navy assembled one of the largest invasion armadas in history. The Fifth Fleet, under Admiral Raymond Spruance, worked alongside Admiral Mark Mitcher's Task Force 58, amassing more than 1,500 ships and 350,000 personnel for the operation. Warships lined the horizon, their guns thundering day after day in an effort to weaken the island's defenses. The bombardment was so relentless that observers would later call it a typhoon of steel. But the Japanese fortifications, buried deep in the hills, were largely untouched. Aircraft from U.S. carriers joined in, strafing and bombing suspected positions, while minesweepers cleared the surrounding waters for the landing craft to come. On April 1st, 1945, L-Day, the long-awaited assault began. The date carried a strange dual meaning. It was Easter Sunday and April Fool's Day. Veterans of Peleliu and Iwo Jima expected carnage the moment they stepped ashore, their memories still raw from the beach assaults of earlier campaigns. Yet when the first waves of Army and Marine units came ashore, there was nothing. No incoming fire, no frantic counterattacks. The men moved across the beaches at a walk, rifles in hand, but still slung on shoulders, their boots sinking into the pale sand. It was an experience unlike any they had known in the Pacific War. The silence was almost unnerving. Admiral Spruance, watching the unfolding scene, sent a message to Admiral Chester Nimitz. "I may be crazy, but it looks like the Japanese have quit the war, at least in this sector." Nimitz, ever terse, replied, "Delete all after crazy." The truth was far more dangerous than any quiet landing could suggest. The defenders had not quit. They were waiting deep within the island, prepared to make the Americans pay for every foot they advanced beyond the beaches. And in the weeks to come, that quiet first day would seem like the last breath of calm before a storm. Now, dear listener, Imagine that brief, deceptive stillness. The salt wind on your face, the gentle hiss of waves sliding up the shore, the muted sound of boots in sand. The sea is calm, the sky wide and pale, and the guns are silent for now. You are safe in this moment, standing at the edge of history before it bursts into motion. Let the steady rhythm of the surf guide your breathing. The battle is still far away, and here there is only peace. Offshore, the U.S. Fifth Fleet faced a trial as relentless as the fight on land. Japanese suicide planes came in waves, the largest kamikaze onslaught of the Pacific War. Radar picket stations, destroyers and smaller vessels stationed far from the main fleet to detect incoming raids became prime targets. They often bore the brunt of attacks meant for the carriers and transports. The destroyer USS Hugh Hadley, holding her lonely station, fought off a swarm unlike any other, downing 23 planes in just 1 hour and 40 minutes. She survived, though battered and scarred, but many ships were not so fortunate. Kamikazes sank more than 25 vessels, damaged over 150, and claimed thousands of lives. Nearly 40% of all American deaths at Okinawa were Navy men lost in these desperate airborne assaults. Then came another enemy, one without a flag. The monsoon season, long predicted, arrived in force. Rain poured without pause for weeks, soaking men, machines, and earth alike. The ground dissolved into a sea of mud that swallowed boots and bogged down vehicles. Dugouts collapsed, rifles jammed with grit, and rations spoiled in their tins. Even the dead, hastily buried, were unearthed by the churning waters. Movement slowed to a crawl. The fighting men, already worn thin by weeks of combat, were pressed into miserable endurance, clawing for ground through a choking mix of mud, exhaustion, and constant enemy fire. Positions like the Shuri Line, Wana Draw, and Hacksaw Ridge became names to remember not only for their strategic importance, but for the grinding human cost exacted on both sides. Sleep came rarely, and when it did, it was shallow and uneasy, stolen between shell bursts. The psychological toll was immense. Battle fatigue became one of the most common non-combat casualties. Yet even as American troops fought on, the Japanese High Command knew the island could not be held. No reinforcements were coming. The Imperial headquarters had begun saving men and weapons for the defense of Japan's home islands, even as Okinawa's defenders were whittled down. In desperation, The Japanese conscripted Okinawan civilians, men, women, and even children, to carry ammunition, take defenses, and in some cases, launch suicide attacks. Propaganda whispered horrors about the Americans, convincing many that capture meant certain torture and death. Thousands took their own lives rather than surrender, hurling themselves from cliffs or dying in mass suicides. By the time the guns fell silent, up to 150,000 of Okinawa's 500,000 inhabitants were gone. More than all the soldiers lost on either side combined. On June 22, 1945, the battle ended. General Mitsuru Ushijima and his chief of staff, General Isamu Cho, committed ritual suicide rather than be captured, ending 82 days of unbroken combat. The toll was staggering. Roughly 250,000 dead, American, Japanese, and Okinawan alike. For the US, the battle was a victory, but it was also a warning. Military planners looking toward the Japanese mainland understood that an invasion there could dwarf the bloodshed of Okinawa. Estimates predicted millions of Japanese casualties and hundreds of thousands of Allied dead. And then, in April, a shift at the very top. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Commander-in-Chief since the war's beginning, died suddenly of a cerebral hemorrhage. Harry S. Truman took the oath of office, inheriting the burden of ending the war. When the reports from Okinawa reached his desk, their numbers and stories weighed heavily. The possibility of repeating such a battle on an even larger scale was unthinkable. Truman sought another way. It came in the form of a secret held tightly by a handful of scientists and military leaders. A weapon unlike any seen before, capable of ending the war without an invasion. The atomic bomb was still untested in combat, but in the shadow of Okinawa's sacrifice, it became the path forward. And now, dear listener, the story of Okinawa rests in the stillness it earned. The beaches are empty, but for the tide. The hills green again, their scars hidden beneath grass and flowers. Shuri Castle stands rebuilt, lit softly against the night. The names of the fallen are carved into stone, not shouted across battlefields. Close your eyes and walk there in your mind, past the cliffs where the sea meets the sky, past the ridges that once burned with gunfire, into a quiet garden where the air is warm and the wind moves gently through the trees. Here there is no sound of war, only the soft hush of waves and the distant call of seabirds. Let that peace settle over you. The struggle is long past. You are safe now. Breathe slowly.
letting the last traces of tension drift away. Sleep deeply, knowing that even in history's darkest chapters, the dawn comes and the world can grow quiet again. Good night.